What is going on? Brian Carroll here, bringing you another edition of the 1020 Life walkthrough video series. Today we are talking about 1020 Life, and we're going to get into the weak points and how you address weak points in the 1020 Life philosophy. So I'm going to get right into this. Thank you once again. I'm trying to keep these videos shorter so I don't go on and on. I'm going to try to keep this one within 5 or 6 minutes and then kind of take you through some of the parts of this chapter and just the visual part and let you see it. That way I don't have to talk so much about it, but there's a lot to this chapter. So let's get right in. So we all have weak points, and some of these are completely obvious in lifters, especially new lifters, while ours aren't as easily noticed. Beginners, generally, their weak points are apparent. They're right there in your face. They have major body part weaknesses, balance issues, and no strength, bad form. So they're generally easy to attack. For this, I believe you need basic work, squats, benches, deadlifts with good form, doing it over and over to really hone in that engram so you do it without even thinking about it. Those are your default motor patterns. You don't need fancy work for someone in the beginning. You always want to go up the chain. Start with the least effective dose, and then the less you apply and throw at the wall at first, the better it's going to be, because then you try one thing, it's not working, then you go up the chain. For this, it's very important to consider, just like getting a steak from Del Frisco's, you don't get it and immediately start throwing ketchup, salt and pepper and all kinds of crazy stuff on it. You see how it is. If it's good, you leave it alone. If it needs a little bit of salt, you throw it on there. You just start with the basics. You establish a baseline, and I'm going to talk about a whole chapter later on in this series, but establishing a baseline and reverting back to a baseline is so important. If you add everything at once, you're not going to know what works. So one thing at a time. Once you figure out your weak points, you need to plan on how to address them and figure out what exercises you need to do. For instance, I give an example in the next couple pages of someone who wants to bring up their sumo style deadlift. So of course, I go on and build a program for someone to build their sumo. And we do this by attacking their conventional deadlift, by helping them lock out, using a little bit more back in the conventional approach. And this little 10-week block is how you see me kind of putting together the elements of what we've went through in the book so far with 1020 Life and building a program. So that's just an example. Again, it's very general. You need to make this philosophy work for you and your specific weak points. So just because I mentioned something or I put together this program with shrugs and rows and everything, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what exactly you need to do. So please keep that in mind. Again, I'm just kind of giving you ideas on how to approach these different things. Then I go into the section of missing out of certain positions in the squat. So missing out of the bottom, I talk about what you can look at, your hips and your glutes. Remember, form is king. If your form isn't good, none of these weak points matter, because you need to lock in your form first. You can make these weak points as strong as humanly possible, but if your form sucks, it's never going to come together for you as good as it should. So missing out of the bottom of the squat, I suggest certain exercises for you. I give you coaching keys, movements that help, and then we go on to missing in the middle for the squat, and then once again the coaching keys and the movements that help, and then of course missing at the very top of the squat. I go on to do the same for the bench, the top, the middle, the bottom, the deadlift, the top, the middle, the bottom, and then of course movements that help, coaching keys. And from there, we start talking about what happens when you need to attack the core, certain core exercises. I mentioned stir the pot. Stir the pot, I think, is one of the best bang for your buck core exercises, especially for those that want to feel their six-pack work interior-wise. It's a great exercise. There's not much stress on the spine. Suitcase carries, kettlebell swings, bottoms up carries, stir the pot. Those things are my go-to core exercises. But again, you might be a little bit different. But for a powerlifter or a strongman, I think those are great exercises. So once again, we go through sumo versus conventional. We talk about the pros and cons. It's going to be dependent on your leverages, your injury history, and what you're better at. I do suggest for people, especially if they want to attack weak points, to work in your opposite stance. It's just one of those things. Sometimes people are really built for conventional and they pull great sumo, and vice versa. Remember, a lot of people don't fit inside the box, so keep this in mind when you read the book. Make it your own. That's what I want you to get out of this series. Make your philosophy, take your bits and pieces from different people, make your own, and if it works for you, then great, that's all that matters. So for me, and the reason why I go into talking about conventional and sumo, when I came back from my back injury, sumo was best for me just during that time, but eventually I came back and pulled conventional. But I think it's a good idea for everyone to be able to pull sumo and conventional, because you never know when you're going to need that ace in the hole and pull a different way. And I suggest this too for people that bench tucked and wide. I think that people should be able to do wide and tucked, not just tucked and not just wide stance, because you never know when your back might be a little bit crunk or your hips are lit up. Then you might need to revert to the other stance or positioning. And it's always good to be able to have it and not need it, and then to need it and not have it. That's the way I look at a lot of things. So to wrap up this section, keep in mind it takes time to adjust pulling the other form. They're almost two completely different movements, but they're very similar. A word of importance to wrap up this section on technique, and I kind of hit this earlier. Keep in mind and pay attention to the coaching cues in this section. We all have weak points, but sometimes these weak points can be easily remedied with proper form, stiffening our core, using the lifter's wedge, and making sure to use these tools in this section accordingly, one variable at a time. Try it for a little bit, give it 5 or 10 weeks, and then if it doesn't work, then move on to the next exercise. And with that said, exercise assistance moves are going to be the next chapter where I tell you how to apply these different exercises in your program. And I give you a list of some of my favorite exercises that have worked for me and for my clients. Guys, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one. Thank you so much for watching today. Please subscribe, like, and share if you enjoyed this video, and have a wonderful day.